Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Franchipreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show. Well, we're meeting with Mark Lyso, CFD and Chief Development Officer at East Coast Wings and Grill. And East Coast Wings and Grill is a full-service family dining wings franchise that spotlights buffalo wings, and guests can choose from 60 different award-winning wing flavors and 7 heat indexes to create over 420 combinations of buffalo-style wings. We're going to talk to Mark about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
Franchise Teacher.
Would you like to know how to franchise your concept or grow your franchise business?
Meet the experts at Franchise Teacher.
The goal of Franchise Teacher is to teach, coach, consult, and advise. The team of experts at Franchise Teacher will evaluate your business model and present you with a winning business strategy.
Franchise Teacher will help you decide whether or not your concept works and if it's franchisable. Franchise Teacher is proud to have over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors.
Franchise Teacher are developers of over a dozen franchise systems, which include brick and mortar as well as home-based concepts of nearly 3,000 combined franchise locations.
Whether you need to add more units or get more customers, Franchise Teacher can help. We will teach.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn our proven system.
Coach.
Franchise Teacher will help you provide a game plan to succeed.
Consult.
Franchise Teacher will make sure you stay on track.
And advise.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn from our over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors. Take advantage of our free, no-obligation phone consultation. Simply go to franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
That's franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Franchipreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show. We're meeting with Mark Lyso, the CFD and Chief Development Officer at East Coast Wings and Grill. And East Coast Wings and Grill is a full-service family dining wings franchise that spotlights buffalo wings. Hi, Mark. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great, Mark. It's great to have you on the show. You know, I didn't realize this, Mark. You probably don't know this, we had East Coast Wings and Grill on the show. I had Sam Ballas on the show. I want to say it was about 12 or 13 years ago. So a lot has happened since then, hasn't it?
Oh, it has. And wow, not only in the restaurant space, but also in the economic space. So
That's right. So I thought, maybe a good place to start, Mark, is maybe, we could talk a little bit about, the history of East Coast Wings and Grill, because we have a lot of new listeners since that time, since we had Sam on the show, and maybe some of the highlights that's happened over the last decade.
Sure. The interesting thing is Sam, and currently Sam, just to kind of inform the audience is he's on the board of directors of the International Franchise Association, and actually will take over the chair of the franchise forum after the IFA convention here coming up in end of February or March.
But
so he was in investments, and he also was in real estate. And he actually was a landlord on a restaurant that sold wings, and he then helped that group, and actually he took over the business and then turned it into East Coast Wings, and then it was about 2001 or 2 where he decided that, he was going to continue to grow into the franchising space. So we've been franchising for over 15 years, and now are at a base of 32 restaurants, with another 6 to 8 to open this year. And really believe in a couple things, Marty, and then I'll free it up here. But, we are really driven by unit-level economics. And, it's interesting. I've been in the franchising business over 25 years, and I can remember the first franchisee that talked to me when I was with another brand, and that's when we were writing checks for royalties. And he said, I write on the front of the check, you write on the back. Let me be as happy writing on the front as you are on the back. And so one of the things that attracted me to Sam, and I've been here 6 years now, is the commitment to the profitability of the franchisee. We've grown slow because we want to ensure profitability of the franchisee. So really a good philosophy as a core pillar of our East Coast Wings and Grill.
That's great, Mark. And when I was looking at, your background, it's very impressive. Not to date you, but you've been in franchising such a long time now. You have so much experience. What do you like most about franchising?
What really excites me is seeing someone get into business and then grow their business and then their personal goals. When I hear franchisees get up at conferences and say that this franchise, whatever it is, allowed them to be their own boss, allowed them to be involved in the community more deeply, provided for their kids' education, the home that they bought, and the whole premise of franchising when it comes to a candidate is finding a brand that has the intellectual capital to help you become that business person that you want to be. It's fascinating. The people that I've come across have relationships with that have, and I've met their families, and it's become a community. So it's like a family to some extent, isn't it, Mark? Absolutely. One of our franchisees got up at our last conference, had tears in his eyes about how he was a beer delivery driver. Heard about and met Sam, and when he was making deliveries into East Coast Wings, wanted to be a franchisee, and started with one, and now has 3, and that was his story. He was able to provide his family to do the things that they wanted to do. We gave a very general description, Mark, of in the introduction of the show, as far as East Coast Wings and Grill, and it's been one of the joys for me in doing this show is when I had the opportunity to interview Sam 12, 13 years ago, and so I usually follow the franchise from that point, to see the growth. I think I actually had one of your earlier franchisees on the show with Sam, and to see where you are today for me, it's really quite impressive. When you're describing East Coast Wings and Grill to, let's say, because you meet with a lot of prospective franchisees, how do you describe the concept? You could do it much better than I could. Well, I think, it's as we know right now currently, Mexican wings, pizza are the 3 top franchise brands, for franchising and for many for the consumer side. East Coast Wings, the main thing that I talk to franchisees about is, one is finding out what they're interested in, and is the food space really where they want to go. And, we believe at East Coast Wings in the 3 pillars of franchising, which really are unit-level economics, how do you get royalty sufficient as a franchisor?
Right.
And then the third pillar being franchisee satisfaction. So, what a couple things we do is, we always direct a candidate to the exhibit in the FDD to talk to our franchisees. FBR, Franchise Business Review, we've been a top performer for 12 years now in a row. And I think, is what's important for the franchise candidate is, number one, understanding what the culture is about the franchisor. I can tell you we're a wing concept that has smaller footprint, less development costs, less employee base required to run the restaurants because we follow trends. We can talk to the franchise candidate to say, we're a customizable wing restaurant, and yet it will always come back to find if the intellectual capital of the franchisor matches your business acumen yourself. And that's the biggest connection that I can tell a candidate, because, listen, there's a lot of wing joints out there. There's a lot of burger joints. There's a lot of food restaurants.
Right.
And it's really, it's the proven track record and the intellectual capital of the franchisor that you're really buying, and that's the important thing.
When I interviewed Sam, 13 years ago, Mark, I guess you could probably go into the title of that emerging brand, and East Coast Wings and Grill has really branded themselves very well, over, the last 10 years. And I'm curious, the franchise that I interviewed, I think she was from corporate America, and that was interesting. You were just telling the story about the gentleman who delivered beer, and he became a franchisee. I'm curious, what do you look for today? Maybe it was a little bit different back then, but what's important for you before you decide that you say, okay, this person is a good match for East Coast Wings and Grill?
Yeah, great question, Marty. This is one of the brands, my fifth brand that I've worked with in the franchise space, and it's the only brand that does not require, in the food space, experience in the food space.
That's interesting.
Concept owner or a single unit concept owner.
Right.
And what Sam and the team have done here over the years is they've built the system, process, procedure, and protocol to be able to make a candidate's dreams come true in the sense of being a business owner. And so, we look at a non-experienced candidate, and if they are, if they have the financial background or backing and capabilities, if they have leadership skills, if they have P&L experience, if they're passionate about the food space and the brand, we can provide them the education and the tools and the support for them to be successful. Now, it's up to them whether they buy into our coaching. But, we haven't changed, and this is, Sam always believed, and when I've known Sam for probably 17 years because of being in the same franchising circle. Right. And when he first said that he was franchising to non-experienced franchisees in the space, it created pause for me until I was here. And then when I realized what we have in place to provide that opportunity for the candidate or the franchisee to be very successful, and again, based on whether they take to coaching or not.
Right. So it sounds like the level of support is based on maybe like the experience level, Mark, and again, if they're open to that, it is interesting because, when I interview, because I interview a lot of food franchises over the last 15 years, a lot of times I hear that, okay, we want someone with experience, and that's what stood out to me is that, East Coast Wings and Grill will take on a franchisee without industry experience. So it sounds like you're saying that person would, as long as they're open to it, the level of support would probably be a little bit different, wouldn't it? Or maybe even if they had franchise experience in the past too. Maybe you could expand on that because I think that's interesting.
Well, I'll start big picture and drive down. It's interesting because you've seen the franchise model change over the years,
Yes.
And, I mean, back in the day when we'd send out brochures and then we'd follow up a phone call.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there became a gatekeeper in those offices. So you had to send out a CD, and then you sent out emails, and then it was exhibiting, and everything moved to, how do we now grow the brand? Because it's incumbent upon the Azor to grow revenue. So I think what's fascinating is, even in the sense of absentee ownership, many brands, including us, have moved into the space of high net worth individuals or individuals, again, of what I just described in leadership and development skills, and may have an operator that is not a franchisee, but at least provides some type of equity to keep them in the business. And I think we have seen that where many of the owner-operator with no experience that are running the business will eventually find someone to run the day-to-day operations of the business if they're profitable. And that's kind of what the movement has been. So, when you look at our building here, we've got well over 150 years combined in the restaurant space. We've got well over 75 years combined in the franchising space. And when you look at the different elements of the business, with Sam being, he's a CCIM in real estate, he's got an investment background, built his own brand. Our COO, Tom Scalise, also does our supply chain. So we have one of the best in the business in understanding supply chain and distribution. We've brought in SVP of operations, has spent more time at East Coast Wings than in the rest of her life, and so we've got a lot of great history with her. So, and then we brought in talent at different levels, mainly to support every step of the way. And it goes to, Marty, when you sign the franchise agreement, how we're going to be connected with you and supporting you in the site selection, real estate process, the construction process, the new restaurant opening process, and then how do we get that restaurant up and running from a training, marketing, IT perspective, and then the operational support to ensure that we manage, or you manage the business, we help oversight it. So one of the other that is unique to East Coast Wings, in my comparison of other brands, we require P&Ls on a monthly basis, and we get those because the franchise community voted on a penalty system if you didn't get your P&Ls in, because they wanted to see comparables, and if they were submitting their P&Ls, they wanted to make sure everybody was. So what we do with that is we get a better understanding of how that operation is running. We can then match to see if they are getting the corporate buys that we've contracted. We can assist them in all areas to help with their profitability, because again, we're driven by unit level economics, so we're there as a support to help them achieve that goal.
I think that keeps things interesting, doesn't it, Mark? Your franchisees sending in their P&Ls, the significance of keeping score. I think it makes it fascinating. And I don't think you were doing that 12, 13 years ago from what I remember. So it's just interesting to see all the growth that's taken place in East Coast Wings and Grill. We were joking on the show when I had Sam on. We were talking about some of the different. I think there was I mentioned 7 different heat indexes, and there's one that's really hot. But I have to ask you, Mark, so when you go into an East Coast Wings and Grill, you have so many different choices to choose from. I think there was 420 combinations of buffalo-style wings. Is there anything that you like personally that stands out that you would, if I went into one with you, you would recommend to me?
Well, I like the kamikaze. That's my favorite wing sauce. And I usually get it medium to hot. I'm not a crazy guy.
Right.
I will tell you that if we went in 10 times, I'm ordering a burger 8 of those 10 times.
Really?
Because I think our burgers are phenomenal. And not to say our wings aren't, because they are phenomenal too. But I love our burgers. I love our tacos. I love our flatbreads and the skillets. But we put out a great burger. It's Angus beef. We season it properly. Put 2 patties on it, and we put a lot of different accoutrements on it that are quite tasty. But and that's, Marty, that's the thing that is unique for us is again, if you go to a competitor and get, let's say, a Caribbean jerk, you're going to get the heat index associated with that. And nice in ECW is that the consumer can pick a heat index and a flavor and make it their wing,
Yeah, that's great. And has the training changed over the years, Mark? I think in the old days it was coming to corporate. I mean, with a lot has happened. We had COVID and things like that. And so how's the training different today, or is it different?
It is different. We still, the franchisee will come to the corporate service center for a minimum of 5-day classroom.
Okay.
And then there's a 30-day in the field. And here's where it's changed, Marty. I mean, we've got loyalty programs now. We've got, all the different guest relations interfaces, how to understand those, and then respond to those. Not only the loyalty in the gift card, but the loyalty card, and then we break everything down to even to guide the franchisee on what they're leaving on the table when they're not using a loyalty program that we have in place. Even the ordering, receiving platforms, the IT platforms. Right now we're making a transition from the old Res database with Micros or Oracle and going into Symphony, which is cloud-based. So all these things, what's interesting is I've been in this business now 30 years, and 30 years ago we were out in the dining room between lunch and dinner putting our invoices in a ledger. And with technology, we moved everybody back into the office. So how do we move people back in the dining room to take care of the guests, but also have that capability of reporting that helps to drive either top line or bottom line, and especially the middle of the P&L, which is the operational expense.
I guess social media is probably a big difference too. 13 years ago, social media was around, but I mean, like you said, even when you're thinking of your loyal customers, Mark, I'm sure that they're posting a lot, that, they were in an East Coast Wings and Grill, and that probably helps a bit too, doesn't it?
It really does, and I don't want to be like the old guy talking about history.
Right.
I just remember even, probably 10, 12 years ago when social media was kind of the thing, and I was with a group where the franchisee says, well, we're not going to put any money into that. We don't see any return on the investment. And so now, if you're not on social media of some sort, whether Instagram or Facebook or even Twitter, that's become now the outdoor board or the billboard, so that it's got to be front and center of people. And the other challenge has always been the creative license that the consumer thinks they can utilize the platform for complaining. Now, obviously, we don't see as many positive responses on Facebook because that's or social media, any platform. It just is not the tendency of the human condition to compliment. But yes, it's navigating through the social platforms and how we're rated, and we follow a large KPI spreadsheet on all our restaurants where we look at the loyalty reward sign up. We also look at what we call penetration, where the what is the guest utilizing and ordering, what are the check average changes within the restaurant.
Right.
We follow the social platforms of Google and Facebook and Yelp to see where each individual restaurant rates, So the whole playing field has changed dramatically, but here's what we have committed to. Mm-hmm. We cannot get away from the guest experience. We cannot hide behind platforms or hide behind desks or walls. We're full contact, full on, exceptional hospitality in our restaurants, and we use the platforms to validate what we're doing versus the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Mark. So when I have someone like yourself on the show, 30 years experience, that's a long time, Mark. So I have to ask you, because a lot of the listeners to our show are, after all this time of 15 years of doing it, we know that most of them are kind of new to franchising. They're kind of exploring the concept of franchising. We sense that a lot of them in the beginning, sometimes they get a little bit overwhelmed because there's so much out there today. There's all these different industries, there's all these different systems, and so it could be a little bit confusing or overwhelming. So, from everything you've learned, from all your time in franchising, what advice would you give to our listeners in their quest to buy a franchise? Very good question, Marty. I think it all comes down to really where's the passion. If you are good in sales, for example, it doesn't matter what you're selling. If you are passionate about that deliverable. Yeah. I spend a lot of time really understanding when I do get inquiries. What is that candidate looking for, and what are they willing to invest? If it's a financial commitment and they want to get in with a certain amount of money, the food space might not be that for them, and I can give them some guidance on where to go. I want to know what is their passion, what is their commitment level, and how do they see being a franchisee can provide them the business and the personal goals that they achieve. One of the challenges of the food space is, albeit you see profitability sales when you open the door, it takes a while to get to that level. And so I'll always ask, again, the candidate, where's your patience level? If you want to get into the food space, you got to find real estate. That can take X amount of time. Then you need plans and drawings and construction and training before you even open the door. So I want them, our commitment to the candidate is the guidance of what's really best for them. And that's the other thing about East Coast Wings is we're not going to have a lot of restaurants in the pipeline to show the valuation of a company. We're in it to find out how can I help you achieve your goals, and those goals may or may not include the food business. Yesterday I was on a call with someone, and after we had a 30-minute discussion, they said, you know what, I don't think I have the commitment level for this. Perfect. If I can help you another way, I will do that as well. No, I think it's great advice, Mark. So, last question. When you're thinking of the future of East Coast Wings and Grill, and it's interesting because I got the impression from Sam is one of the messages was he never wanted to grow too big too fast. I remember he mentioned that a couple of times, and I was really impressed when he was mentioning that. But if you can look into a crystal ball, Mark, if it's a year or 3 years or even 5 years down the road, where do you see East Coast Wings and Grill? And to validate, Sam has always said that. And I've known that of Sam for the years I've known him. Our goal is to hit 40 by the end of the year, 50 by the end of 24, and we want to gradually put 8 to 10 restaurants a year. Here's a couple other things, Marty, that add to that is, we've always followed trends. We knew even, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but during the pandemic, we were
we were hand in hand with our franchisees on a daily, weekly basis.
Right.
We were providing everything to help preserve their business. One of the things that we've looked at, and the reason why I say that this is even becoming more attractive, we've looked at trends. We've reduced our footprint by 30%, our development cost by 30%.
Wow.
Sam himself opened a restaurant that's a little shy of 2,400 square feet and has a full bar, full service, have less people on shifts and on schedule. Development costs drop, and the rent structure drops then. So he's been able to realize some significant sales gains and profitability because of that shrinking box. So we're even moving to the next evolution or the next gen, if you will, of somewhere in that 2,800 square foot box that gives people, it helps to alleviate and mitigate the concern about where do I get my staff, how much rent do I have to pay, and we've even seen side door revenue being third-party pickup or curbside. We were pre-pandemic at about 26%. We're still blended average of over 40% side door revenue. So now we're able to satisfy the guest that wants it at home, the guest that wants to dine in, and we're able to help our franchisees with their top line and the profitability.
It's very impressive, Mark. What's the best way, Mark, for our listeners to get more information on East Coast Wings and Grill? Of course, it's the franchise opportunity, but even the service and product itself. Are there any websites you can kind of direct them to, Mark?
Yeah, the EastCoastWingsFranchise.com is our best tool. There it has all the information that one could take a look and see, and then we also have some of our newsroom or press releases on that as well. We do have a great site on LinkedIn, our homepage, East Coast Wings Grill on LinkedIn. And then obviously anybody can give me a call at 336-760-4985, extension 119. Be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you today, Mark, and I don't want to wait another 12 or 13 years to have you back on the show. So I'm going to follow up with you in another year or so.
I've appreciated it as well.
Oh, this has been my pleasure, Mark. And we'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up in our next segment, we will be playing a clip from our Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, FranchiseInterviews.com. Or you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to FranchiseInterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott from Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. We've been hosting Franchise Interviews many years now, and you can actually hear the show in a number of different places today. You can go to, of course, FranchiseInterviews.com, where we have our interviews arranged alphabetically. We also have interviews arranged by category. So if you have a particular industry that you're interested in, you can go to the category of your choice and check out all the different interviews that we've done over the years. Our show's been syndicated in a number of different places. Of course, you can hear our show on blogtalkradio.com. We've been working with Blog Talk Radio for many years now. And you can hear the live shows there, and then you can download them as an MP3. You can hear our shows on Stitcher.com. You can hear our interviews on, I think it's pronounced, I always want to call it Blueberry.com, but it's BLUBRRY.com, which is another podcast service. You can now hear our shows on iTunes.com, and of course, you can hear our shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if you're a diehard fan to our show on live365.com. And we have over the years over 420 shows. So if you were to listen to live365.com for 2 weeks, there's a chance that you may not even hear the same show twice. So that's how many shows we've recorded over the years. But today's Great Quote in Franchising podcast comes from Darren Guccione, and Darren is the CEO and co-founder of Keeper Security, Inc. And what's interesting about this podcast, we had Darren on the show as the founder and the creator of Keeper, which is the world's most downloaded passwords manager and digital vault. And Darren is a real entrepreneur. And one of the questions that we ask on the show is, what advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur or franchipreneur or someone looking to buy a franchise? And that question is usually directed to someone who has been directly involved in franchising over the years. But again, Darren is a real entrepreneur. His background is in accounting and business, and I thought his response was just as great as anything that we've heard on the show. So here we go with Darren Guccione, the CEO and co-founder of Keeper Security, Inc.
Amazing. It's amazing technology. In studying your background, Darren, I mean, I was mentioning earlier, I mean, the majority of our listeners, again, we call them aspiring franchipreneurs. You know, they want to go into their own business, and they're kind of like heading towards the franchise alternative. What advice would you give to them? Because you're certainly, in studying you, certainly classified as an entrepreneur. So what advice would you give to them?
Well, my background is engineering technology. I'm also a CPA, and
right.
I've always had an admiration for franchises. One of the things that I love about franchises, among other things, is that you can analyze the different franchise models that are out there, the brands, the type of businesses, and you can quickly identify which ones are successful. And typically, they give you a roadmap of what you need to do to execute. When you start a business without a franchise roadmap, you typically don't necessarily know where you're necessarily going to go or wind up. And so you get a greater sense of security and guidance when you can pick a franchise model that, A, fits within, your goals in life, your interests in life, and B, provides a really sound infrastructure for you to build a business with a great support system around you. Most businesses that are one-off businesses don't have that. So there's a greater sense of, uncertainty out there when a business owner or an entrepreneur, as you've outlined it, decides to, pursue a franchise versus doing something completely fresh and new. I think the risk profile of doing the latter is much greater. So that's my response to that.
No, it's fantastic advice. So any final thoughts, Darren?
Fantastic interview with Darren Guccione. So I want to thank everyone for making our show such a success, and this podcast has really just taken off over the years, and we got some really great quotes in franchising coming up. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising from Franchise Interviews. Take care, everyone.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.